So welcome, Colin. We really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today to talk to us about all things that are happening in our world right now. So let me first ask you, the first question I want to ask you is, are you back in the district right now? And how are you and Alexandra and Jordan doing during this rather uncertain time?
Yeah, well, thank you, Ken, for having me. So we are stuck in DC after our last vote. My son has been having some ear infections and some other issues, so we haven't been able to fly. And obviously, in both places, we're on a lockdown. But yeah, I've been in constant touch with everybody there, and we're all working remotely, and I think we're all learning how to work from home with kids bursting in and all that. So, but everybody's healthy. So.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear that part of it. But we wish you were back here in the district, and so we could, and we wish we could actually see you firsthand. But we're doing the best we can with what we have. So this is great. So 15 months ago, when you assumed your role, could you have ever envisioned two calamities occurring within your district within such a short period of time?
No, I mean, this is, as you know, it's been so long since we had a tornado hit in Dallas City proper, and certainly one as damaging as the one that we had. And now we're facing a global pandemic that I think no one could have predicted would hit now. I think we all, those of us who've been studying these things, know that there's always a chance of it coming up, but the seriousness of this is just beyond, I think, anybody's ability to predict. And so it's been, one of the most, I think, eventful first terms for anybody who's ever come to Congress. We were sworn in during the longest shutdown in government history. We've had a bunch of other big deals, and now we're dealing with probably not only this pandemic, but also what the IMF is now calling a global recession that we're gonna have to find our way out of.
Yeah. So you and your colleagues have been very busy, obviously, and you've now passed 3 stimulus packages, and a potential for a 4th is on the way. So I think what many of us here on this call today are really interested in is, tell us about the highlights of the CARES Act and the process that you and your colleagues went through to pass this historic legislation.
Well, thank you. Yeah, this is our 3rd bill, and as you mentioned, we will probably need to have a 4th and a 5th, and we'll have to just keep going to see how long it takes us to get through this crisis. But in the most recent bill, the CARES Act, which is a $2.2 trillion package, which is historic, both in its size and in the speed with which it passed. I mean, it takes a lot longer than a week to do almost anything around here. And from Saturday to Friday, when it was introduced, to Friday when we passed it, that's a very rapid time frame. And so there's certainly a sense of urgency, and I think everybody should also feel a certain amount of comfort in that it passed unanimously in the Senate, passed on a voice vote unanimously in the House, and was signed so quickly. So that means that there's a lot of bipartisan agreement around it. And the parts that I think are most applicable to the folks who might be joining this call is the small business aspect. We do, of course, also have over $50 billion for our airlines. I'm been in close contact with American and Southwest, and we know how important they are for our area and also for our airports, both Love Field and DFW. And we're going to make sure that they are able to keep operating. And I'm glad, and I was part of the effort to make sure that support was there, because as you probably have seen, Ken, there was some pushback on that. But there's over $350 billion for small businesses, and I think that's a big number. And now our job is to get that out there to the American people, to our small business owners, so that they can actually get access to this funding. And that's why I'm so happy to be joined by Mr. Kumar today from the Small Business Administration. Some of the highlights here for small business: we have $377 billion investment in small businesses to help business owners get back on their feet and keep workers on their payrolls. So that we have rent, mortgage, and utility costs are eligible for SBA loan forgiveness, and we'll talk about, I'm sure, the loan forgiveness program. $10 billion for SBA emergency grants of up to $10,000 to provide immediate relief for small business operating costs. $17 billion for SBA to cover 6 months of payments for small businesses with existing SBA loans. So that's, if you have an existing loan, you have access to that. The 3 programs that I think we should discuss and may discuss are the economic injury disaster loans, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the Small Business Debt Relief Program. Those are the three big programs that are out there, and they all have different applicability, and they all have some slightly different processes for getting access to them. But our goal is going to be to make sure that we get it out there as quickly as possible. And the Treasury Department is moving very quickly on this. I know SBA is ramping up and is giving a lot of money for them to get moving on this. And my office is here to help as well, to help anyone who needs to get access to this money.
It's great. Well, when we get into the Q&A, I'm sure there's going to be a lot more requests for drilling down on that, but that's a nice, helpful summary at the high level, Colin. So talk to us a little bit about the more specificity around the small business relief in terms of the process. What can we expect in terms of execution, timelines, things like that?
Well, the timelines are compressed here, and we're going to be moving pretty quickly. Right now, from what I've seen, checking with local banks, the Paycheck Protection Program, I don't think is totally up and running, but it will be hopefully by the end of the week is what I've been told. And SBA has revamped their website and has allowed for, I think, a smoother process for applying through the SBA website for economic injury disaster loans. And just to talk about economic injury disaster loans, those are actually issued by SBA, and those are administered by SBA, and I'm sure Mr. Kumar can go into some details about that. The Paycheck Protection Program is a federally backed loan program through normal SBA lenders, and so that is, you can get that from your lender of choice in the area, and so it's a little bit different. So, but you should go through your the lender that you've been using, and if they are not part of the SBA program, they can apply for that as well to become a part of it. But you can go to the SBA website and find out what vendors are available to you. And on our website, we also have some information on this. The website is allred.house.gov/COVID-19 small business. And we have a guide on there that you can download and print. It walks through every single aspect of these three types of loans. And it also encourages you to contact us should you have any trouble accessing them. And so the time frame here should be very quick from application to the administration of the money. That's been part of our focus with the bill. And I know that's also what the Treasury Department said they want to do. But I also want to know if that's not happening quickly, because then we may need to take some steps to make sure it does.
Okay. I was doing an interview for WFAA about the CARES Act, and one of the questions that they posed to me that was a surprise to me was that they said that the Small Business Administration office in Fort Worth had already had 3 people be diagnosed with the coronavirus. Mm-hmm. And just curious, what are your thoughts about making sure that we have enough people on hand to execute on the plan relative to getting capital into small business owners' hands?
Yeah, that's a big concern. And across the government, everyone, as much as possible, is working remotely and trying to follow all the various stay home and stay safe orders that we're under. There are some essential personnel who are still going into their jobs, but it's pretty limited. And we did provide funding in this bill to try and give SBA funding to hire new folks to administer some of these programs and to revamp their website to allow it to take an increased amount of traffic. And hopefully with those steps taken, we'll be able to bring on the workforce to process this, because I'm sure you can imagine, Ken, that is probably going to be the bottleneck. It's not going to be the money that's available, and it's not going to be the demand for the money. It's going to be the application process and the administration of it. And we're aware of that. Again, though, if it's not working, I do want to know that, because then we can take some steps to try and mitigate that. And I see we have a request for the website again, and so I'll just repeat that. You can download our guide for all these programs at allred.house.gov, which is my house website, /COVID-19 small business.
And Congressman, if I may jump in and talk briefly about our economic injury disaster loan package, if I may. This is a good time, Ken?
Of course, Ashil, please.
Great. There's been a rapid intake streamlining of SBA applications, which basically makes it very, very easy to apply. And I'll share that for the general good momentarily. But here's some of the refinements. Apply. It's Q&A, literally revenue, cost of goods sold, been in business, how long, so on and so forth, and hit submit. Certain certifications that share with the SBA underwriting community that you're not involved in anything illegal or ineligible. And then a radio button that starts off with, hey, I am an applicant with more than 500, less than 500, I'm a travel concern, I'm an agriculture cooperative, so on and so forth. There are no personal guarantees for up to $200,000. Anything over, it's being required. There are no real estate collateral requirements up to $500,000. 6 months worth of working capital being put into people's hands right off the bat. And from what I understand, as a result of the streamlining, money is getting into the hands of the people within a week or two after submission. And last but not least, when you apply on our website, there is a box to mark off whether or not you want to be considered for an advance. And that advance is against proposed loan proceeds being approved. So if you're not approved, you have no obligation to repay it. But those $10,000 up to could be used to relieve payroll pressures that the small business owner might be feeling. So that's a very high level bullet point sharing of details with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
No, thank you. And thanks for being part of this call too. I should have recognized you earlier and I apologize for that. But you're playing an integral role in this whole process and we thank you, Sushil. So let's come back to the CARES Act. Well, let's look into your crystal ball, Colin, and let's look at the fourth iteration of stimulus. What are you seeing in that package? What's starting to evolve in your conversations? I know everyone's on recess right now, but I'm sure you're still in active dialogue with your colleagues. So what's in that package that isn't in the current packages?
Yeah, we do have about 2 to 3 conference calls a day to talk about legislation and how this is operating and also just to check in. So there's ongoing conversations. So the phase that we're in right now is what has been referred to by many of us as mitigation. We're trying to mitigate the effects of what is happening and what this virus is doing in terms of the requirements for us to stay home and the impact on the economy. What we were unable to do in this last package was to get enough money, I think, to cities and to townships. So if you're a town or a city under 500,000, as we have many in my district, Richardson and Garland and Saxby and Wiley, then you won't get the direct assistance. The cities will and the states will, and the states can provide that funding to you, but it's not direct assistance in the way that I would like to see us do. So I hope we will take care of our smaller cities and towns in this next bill. We're also, and you probably might have seen the president tweeting about infrastructure. Surprisingly enough, there is a point of agreement here. We are thinking about for the recovery phase of this to have a massive infrastructure package that would deal with some of the things that are the costs that we know are necessary that have been delayed, but also to try and act as stimulus in terms of how the money is being spent to get it back into the economy. And so there is a chance, even in a year like this with everything that's going on, that we may do something on infrastructure. And I'm excited about that. Some of the issues that are being raised that we know about from folks staying home or access to broadband and high-speed internet around the country, that's not something that everybody has access to. But if you're going to work from home, have kids taking school from home, that's obviously an issue. In North Texas, we have a lot of demands that are being placed on our water systems and on our electrical grid. Last summer, every single day for a stretch there was the highest kilowatt power outage that we had ever had on a daily basis. It just depended on what day it was. And so our growth is going to require us to make some smart investments on that, as well as our runoff systems. And I know Jeff has done a lot of great work with our parks and trails, and there's some support that we can provide there. But basically, we're going to try and, I think, from mitigation to recovery, I think you'll see some similar efforts to what happened in 2009 around the Recovery Act there, to see what we can do to try and deal with what's happening with the coming recession, that the global recession and the United States recession that I think most of the economic experts I've heard from have said that we're going to be unable to avoid.
Thank you. Thank you for that forecast for the future. So, all right. So I want to highlight for everyone here, please feel free to issue questions through the chat function, or if you want to just raise your hand and let me know, you're more than happy to do that as well. But before we do that, let me ask Colin a couple of other quick questions that are outside of the stimulus packages that they've been working so diligently on. Colin, can you give us an update on where we are relative to the dialogue with FEMA and tornado relief?
Yeah, unfortunately, we got some bad news here. Our application was denied, I think yesterday, by FEMA for full reimbursement. There are some issues here that FEMA is placing we do meet the threshold for cost, but FEMA is placing our cost estimates in two different buckets that don't add up to the threshold that you would need on its own. I disagree with that decision. I think that that's the incorrect way to consider our application. And Governor Abbott now has the option of appealing, and I hope that he will. We have not, my office, I haven't discussed it with his office, but I'm assuming that there will be an appeal. Should that appeal be denied as well, I've spoken with Congresswoman Johnson, Eddie Bernice Johnson, about some direct things that we can do potentially in the budget to try and provide the funding this is not just Dallas County, we had several counties in Texas that were hit by storms. And I did lead a letter to the president asking him to authorize funding for that. But we may have to do something directly through an appropriation to try and cover those gaps. Otherwise, the cost is going to be borne by us locally. So.
Okay. Thanks for that update and unfortunate news, but at the same time, it's not surprising. We were kind of expecting that kind of response anyway.
Congressman, may I share some loan details about what we did from the SBA for the purposes of meeting the needs of the many who were impacted by the tornado?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
We had approximately $7.9 million worth of SBA money that was funded for that specific incident. And there were over 250 loans that were made, and the number of applications I'll get back to you momentarily, but just want to let you know we did our part, a very small part, in trying to mitigate the needs of the business owners, the homeowners, the renters, and the private nonprofits that we serve as part of the small business gamut of society needs, if you will, under normal circumstances. So that's our small part. And I'll send you those details to Judith so that you have it handy.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. All right, again, switching gears quickly. Today is Census Day. So Colin, talk to us a little bit about the importance of the census. I noticed that I think in our area, we're about a third of people have responded to date, but obviously there's a lot of work to do before the census process is complete. So talk to us a little bit about the importance of the census.
Yeah, and the census is going to change. The way it's administered is going to change because of this virus. As you may remember, in past census, we've had folks going door to door. That's not likely going to be able to occur. And so it's going to be even more important that we do this online and over the phone. And I know that there are plans being made on how to deal with that. But for Texas, and the last stats that I saw showed that we were in the bottom 10 states for overall response as a state. And that's something that we could probably anticipate, but it's also extremely worrying because we will have hundreds of millions of dollars in federal aid that is tied to a correct count. And if we don't get a proper count, then it will just cost us money that will be borne at the state and local level. And there's no other way to slice it, because the same number of folks will be going to our schools and going to our hospitals and going and driving on our roads and using our water, but they won't be getting the federal funding for the calculations that are done based on an accurate count of our population. And so that's a huge problem for us. And my office, and I know all of my colleagues in North Texas, I think we're all on the same page of trying to push very hard for an accurate count. And Dallas County has done a very good job of, and the city of Dallas, I think, of trying to spread information about this. And I want to thank the North Dallas Chamber for being a part of that. I think every single Chamber of Commerce and every single business can play a role in this, because it'll also impact our business community as well in terms of the overall funding that comes down. So this has been a problem for us. We knew it was going to be a problem in terms of getting an accurate count in Texas because of our growth. We need to get that accurate count. We need to know where people are. We need to know where we should have more money for people with disabilities, more money for our hospitals. If you follow what's going on in Parkland right now, just imagine that if Parkland not getting the support that it needs to deal with folks who may be coming in who don't have the ability to pay for their treatment, we have to have an accurate count for our local economy.
Great. All right. Thank you. Last on my question list, before I've already got a series of questions here that I would like to pose to you, but last on my list is talk to us a little bit about what's the impact going to be on the political process as we go through the summer and the fall. What are you seeing is going to change? How are this, obviously we already know that municipal elections that were going to be held in May have already been moved to November. But what are some of the impacts that you're going to see, Colin, do you think, relative to the COVID crisis?
Well, this is going to change everything for us politically and the way we conduct our democracy. And I'm more interested in the Democratic side of it in terms of the small d, how do we get people to vote and make sure that we have an actual fair election. For political campaigns, of course, you won't be able to do large events and rallies, and I don't think that there will be any scenario even into the early fall and late summer where we will see large gatherings of that kind, because I think that even if we are hopefully at a better place at that time on testing and treatment, we will not be entirely out of the woods until we have a vaccine. And a vaccine is at least a year away from everything that I've heard, despite what I think is the best efforts of a lot of very smart people around the world. It's unlikely that we'll be able to gather in those ways. And so it'll have to change the way we conduct campaigns. But the more important thing to me is how we conduct our democracy. And in Texas, we, as you know, have vote by mail for folks who are 65 and older, or if you are out of the jurisdiction that you'd be voting in for the entire voting period, then you can vote by mail. I think that should be extended to all Texans so that everyone can vote by mail. Many states are doing this right now for their presidential primary contests that are still ongoing, of course. We still don't have a Democratic nominee. And I think that's the best way for us to guarantee that we actually have folks come out to vote. There are a number of vulnerable populations out there who should not be encouraged to come into a polling place, to have to cast their ballot, and vote by mail is a way for us to address this. Voter registration is also a concern because we don't have online voter registration, but you can go to the Dallas County website, download a form and mail it in to register yourself. And of course, there's still the DMV options and all that. But we have a number of folks who are new to our area. That's just the story of our growth, is that people have been moving here. They need to get registered to vote. You're no longer going to see in-person voter registration. Most likely that's not going to be an aspect of this going forward. And so Dallas County does have mail-in forms that are available that people can use. And when we do reopen and have businesses open, I would encourage anyone who wants to support extension of access to registration to keep some of those mail-in forms maybe on your counter or something like that, where people can take one and mail it in. It's not a Democratic or Republican priority. It should be, I think, everybody's priority, so that we can make sure people are registered and have a fair election. And so we had a provision in a bill to extend vote by mail to the entire country if we're still under a national emergency declaration, which I think we likely will be. I hope that the governor and our legislature will come together and decide that if we are still under these same orders, still under emergency orders, that we have universal vote by mail access for folks.
Great. Thank you. All right, so let me ask a couple of people to join us here. Scott Humphrey is on the line. Scott is the co-chair of our Public Policy Council, and he has a comment as well as a question. So Scott, can you unmute and jump on here?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. A couple things I wanted to just bring up is, I'm a tax partner, and I have not had to deal with the SBA loan provisions ever in my career, more so than what I have the past 3 to 4 days. The tax provisions in the bills are nice, but I know all of my clients are very interested in the SBA loan provisions, especially the ones for the greater than 50 employees with the 500 hour limit. So I want to say, I do feel like that is being received very well from businesses firsthand. So it's putting some additional pressure on all of us trying to get up to speed on the rules and provisions. Part of the bill was there is some additional regulations that was put out and some guidance on how the wages and different mechanics are being calculated. Do you have any update on when some of that guidance could be provided?
For how the wages are calculated for the purposes of the Paycheck Protection Program, is that or is it?
Yes, on the Paycheck Protection Program.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll say, there's people are coming up with different calculations on how to get to the amount of the loan that they can have, plus the forgiveness aspect of it as well. I think the provisions related to the economic disaster area loans, those are, that seems very helpful. There's a lot of people who've been pleasantly surprised by that application process. And I know on the new Paycheck Protection Program, there's a lot of people who are also very pleased about the lack of guarantee that's related to that, and the lack of additional paperwork that has to go through, especially dealing with clients who are used to 20, 30-page applications on other loan documents. Yeah.
Well, we will try to check with SBA on timing of to clarify that question, unless Mr. Kumar has any answer he wants to give. I quickly just want to say, how is the loan size determined? And the loan size can be calculated in different ways. The maximum, of course, is $10 million under the, I'm going to use PPP for short here. And the period of operation is from February 15th, 2019 to June 30th, 2019. And your max loan is equal to 250% of your average monthly payroll cost during that time period. And there are some exceptions for seasonal workers, and we can answer specific questions around that. And so that's the way, the size and overall the aspect of that. And in terms of payroll, what costs are eligible for this? We have compensation, which means salary, wage, commission, or similar compensation, payment for vacation, parental and family and medical leave, allowance for dismissal or separation, payment provision required for provisions of group healthcare benefits or premiums, retirement benefits, and any state or local taxes assessed on the compensation of employees. So those are the categories of what's eligible under that for payroll. And Mr. Kumar, do you have anything you want to jump in on? Or?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, $2 million maximum for our economic injury disaster loan. We're fronting $500,000 maximum up front with no collateral. And timing, as I mentioned, is fairly quickly, within a week or two of submission. $10,000 of it is the advance that we talked about. And last but not least, the comment about SBA guidance. Are you all right, Ken? Just want to make sure you're not choking on the information I'm giving you. Sorry, a little bit of levity. And from terms of SBA guidance, the sums of money that we're lending, I think I've just mentioned that. The guidance is coming from headquarters, from what I understand, sometime on Friday. And I have no other information that I can share. I'm sure the congressman is probably in the loop more, given his access in HQ, than I am. But my understanding is Friday is the number that everybody's banding about, or the day that everybody's banding about.
Yeah, we heard, I was on a call yesterday where we were told Friday as well. So.
Great. All right. North Dallas Chamber Board Member Phil Metters, he has a question. If you want to unmute, Phil. No? Doesn't look like Phil's unmuting. So
there we go.
Oh, there he is. There he is.
Got it off there. Paper this morning, Congressman mentioned that maybe another infrastructure stimulus bill how real is that? And you know, is
Yeah.
it going to be focusing on like shovel ready, or, you know, let's, you know, get stuff in the pipeline and get it going? What is your
Yeah.
sense on that?
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't want to be overly optimistic. We've tried to do infrastructure several times over the last 15 months, and we haven't been able to reach an agreement on part of it. The biggest thing we've had issues with is how we're going to pay for it and the revenue. That, I think, is less of an issue right now, to be honest with you, because everybody is in the mode of mitigation and recovery and understanding that we're going to have to do a lot to get the economy back in shape. And so the biggest hurdle, so to speak, I think, is in some ways a little bit less of a hurdle now than it was before. There are, if you look, I think in January, we released on the House side the infrastructure package that we would like to see with some top lines. And I can try to send you a link to that that package that we put out so you can kind of see what the committees that I am involved with, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, what its priorities were. But there certainly were roads and rail are a big part of it, updating our airports and ports of entry in general, a big part of it, high-speed internet, water, electrical grid. It really was comprehensive. We have about a $2 trillion need nationwide in terms of what we need to invest in infrastructure. I don't know if that will all be in the package that will be discussed. I'm just saying that's what our need is. So I don't think it'll be hard to find the projects. In fact, we've had many projects that I think should have been approved already that weren't around the country. We've had some delays in terms of money that was going out. So I don't anticipate there being any problem with shovel-ready projects or projects that are absolutely necessary. This is not the kind of thing where I think you'll see, you know, bridges to nowhere. These are actual projects that I think will really be needed and that people have been waiting for. We have some actually in North Texas as well that would fall under that category.
Thank you. Audrey, does that answer your question? Audrey Kohler?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Yes, it does. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. So our good friend and chamber colleague, the CEO of the LGBT chamber, Tony Vetta, is on the line, and he has a question as well. Tony, you're still muted, I think. You back? Okay. We can't hear you, unfortunately. So his question, I can pose it for you because it impacts the North Dallas Chamber as well. 501c6s were specifically excluded from phase 3 of the stimulus packages. So question for you is, do you expect that to be included in phase 4? And is there a specific reason why 501c6s would have been excluded? And by the way, for everyone's benefit, a 501c6 is a nonprofit. That's an organization. It's not a charity organization. It's more of an organization or an association. And so chambers fall into that category as well as many other organizations. So sorry, Colin.
No, that's fine. It was. I'm not sure if it was an oversight or why this was left off. Just to tell everybody what is covered. Small businesses, 501c3s, 501c19s, which are veterans organizations, and a few other like tribal organizations and others were included, but 501c6s were not. And I was on a call yesterday with the Small Business Committee here in the House, in which they were saying that they want to address that in the next bill. Now that, of course, would require the Senate to agree and the President to sign off on it and all of that. And some things I know were lost in negotiation between the House and the Senate. I'm pretty sure that I'm on solid ground when I say that I think under the House version, the 501c6s were covered, but I don't want to go too far down that road because it doesn't matter. It didn't come out in the final package. But I know that we discussed it yesterday, and it's certainly, it's been raised by a number of folks, and a lot of my colleagues had mentioned it, so I think all of us are hearing about it. And usually when that happens, there's some action. So I'm hopeful that we will address that.
Great, thank you. Tom Ryden has a great question that's, I'm sure, on the minds of many of us, and it's around the deficit that will occur as a result of this. So, Tom, are you on? Do you want to pose that question more broadly?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you for the opportunity, and thank you very much, Congressman, for spending time with us. Basically, you know, all the stimulus packages are essential, and I know there may be more to come, because clearly, as we know, all of this is blowing big holes in the budgets of business and state and local governments. At the same time, it also blows a big hole in the federal budget. And so I guess what I'm wondering, thinking back to the 2008-2009 rescue, granted it was a different scenario and different set of situations, but as I recall, there were recovery mechanisms in that allowed at least some recovery of the monies that were going out. Mm-hmm. Any discussion long-term about opportunities to begin to try to repair the hole in the federal budget as a result of this?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Tom, for the question. I completely agree with you. And, you know, I think many of us were concerned about where we were fiscally before this happened and are more concerned even now. And I think that's, as you said, as you rightly said, this is a crisis. We have to focus on getting through this crisis. And then we're going to have to make some tough decisions about what we're going to do on the fiscal front. I will say this, the Fed Chairman, Jerome Powell, when speaking with the Speaker and the Majority Leader on the Senate side, was saying with global interest rates and interest rates so low, this is the time to think big and to get through this and to go big. And I understand that, and that's what we're trying to do. I mean, a $2 trillion package, if you look back on the Recovery Act from 2009, I think it was $900 billion, so we're significantly past that, and there will be more to come. But interest rates will go up again at some point. And as you said, some of the money that went out previously did have provisions for payback and for the option for the money to come back in. There are certainly aspects of this that will come back to the Treasury. Some of these are loans that will not be forgiven. They are low interest loans and they are long-term loans, as Mr. Kumar could mention, I'm sure. They have a long time frame on them, but they are to be paid back. We have some loan forgiveness in the Paycheck Protection Program. So some of this will come back to the Treasury. Some of the money that's going to be going out to our larger businesses like the airline industry will also come back to us. But it's absolutely true that we're going to have to deal with our deficit at some point. And I'm not going to be political here, but I do think that the tax bill that we passed in 2017 did put us in a larger hole because it added $2 trillion to the deficit over a 10-year period at a time when we probably should have been paying that down because we were in a time of plenty. That is not just my opinion, that's the opinion of many experts who've looked at this. So I think the first task is to get through this and to keep our small businesses in particular employed and our vital industries, get them through this. The airline industry, I think for me as a North Texas representative, as somebody who cares very deeply about them, we have to get them through this period because any recovery will be dependent on them existing and being able to help us recover. But we're gonna, as a people, gonna have some conversations after this is over about what we're gonna do to deal with not only our financial situation, but looking outwards at a global recession and how we're gonna go forward.
And unlike, if I may jump in, Ken and Congressman, just to piggyback on your statements, the economic injury disaster loan that we have with the SBA for the maximum of $2 million is a long-term inclusive of all vendors payable. It is a working capital installment loan that covers all of your vendors. So the only part that I will put my foot into the waters on the PPP is that is more labor, that is more on the side of rent and utilities. Ours is much more comprehensive in terms of meeting the entire supply chain of people that may have been impacted. In addition to making your payroll, you can also make payments on bank debt. So for example, people that actually have lines of credit to their banks due, They may have a working capital requirement on their loan covenants, which they may be breaching very significantly soon. So payments to lines of credit could be made from our program because that's in part of the injury. Secondly, long-term debt, current portion due, is also part of the balance sheet on the balance sheet structure. We can make payments to it. And last but not least, in terms of payback, the deferment is in place for 12 months, allowing for the real economy to recover, business to recover. And the final point is, we're asking businesses to take advantage so that they are ready to open the door when they're given the instructions to go open. We don't want them not to have employees that are paid up to date. We don't want them not to have their product not paid up to date. So when the order comes tonight to open up tomorrow, people are paid, they're ready to go, vendors are paid, products on the shelf, rock and roll. That's the mindset.
Great, thank you. So we have several elected officials on this call as well, and one of them is Mike Land. Mike is a council member from the town of Capel, and so Mike, you have a question for Colin?
Sure. Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
All right. First of all, city manager, don't
Oh,
elevate.
I'm sorry, city manager. I apologize, Mike. I apologize.
You actually work for a living.
Yeah.
They do too. They do too. Thank you for doing this. One of the things that we observed in the stimulus bill is that there's the provisions for sick leave pay, but cities were not included in that ability, with especially related to our public safety, first responders. Is that something that can be addressed in the next version, please?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. I had not heard that previously, but we will look into that, and I'll see how that can be considered. That's a good point. Thank you, Mike.
So Deborah Hoyt from Access Technologies is on the phone right now. Deborah, do you want to make a comment?
I can, sure. Thank you, Congressman, for being with us today. I just wanted to express our thanks to you as we represent the technology industry here in Dallas for the home health and hospice agencies that are on the front lines providing care to people in their homes, especially those that that have COVID or have been identified with COVID and can stay home. Some forget that home health and hospice agencies, along with some of our physician practices, are actually small businesses. And I know we're talking about small businesses now, but they are struggling as well. So I just wanted to let you know that there was quite a bit of relief in the CARES Act, along with what CMS released in terms of waiving and reducing some of the regulatory burdens on these home health and hospice providers when it comes to meeting some of the very stringent rules. So you've been a champion for us, and we've really appreciated that. Just wanted to let you know that these frontline folks are really struggling too, because their own workers are afraid to go into the home to care for people with COVID. And then people oftentimes don't want home care workers to go into their homes thinking they're bringing the illness there. So there's a lot of challenges around healthcare and economics that are playing into things that we're working on every day, but appreciate your support. Thank you.
Deborah, if I could ask you, do you, the folks that you work with, do they have a comfortable level of personal protective equipment, or are you seeing the same shortages that we're seeing across Dallas County?
That's a great question. We're hearing mixed messages. I think over the past 2 to 3 weeks, we were hearing that the personal protective equipment was going priority to hospitals and inpatients, hospitals and nursing homes, and then the home health and hospice agencies that are going into homes and dealing with people on a very personal level did not have that appropriate equipment. And that's challenging for those folks. We are hearing that just lately over the past week, they're starting to get some more supplies, but if there's any way that you can help prioritize and just remember, this is really what I call the invisible workforce that's on the ground and has traditionally served more people on a daily basis in the Dallas and Texas, entire state of Texas, than hospitals and nursing homes had combined previous to this. So this is a huge, substantial workforce, and these folks really appreciate anything you can do for them in terms of the PPE. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. We're going to be, PPE is a big focus for me right now. It's, for us, it's a national crisis. I was on a call with Judge Jenkins last night with our North Texas Congressional delegation, where he was basically asking us to help find any source of PPE that we can. And we're working with Toyota, who has stepped up and is making face shields and face masks, and they're going to try and help out. But this is a big problem that we have. And I know, particularly with what we're seeing in our nursing homes and our homes that elderly folks are in, people are wanting to bring their family members home now with some of the outbreaks that are going on. And so it may be even more important for home health workers that you're able to have access to that protective equipment. And I can promise you that we are very aware of it. We are trying extremely hard to address our supply issues here. Ken, at some point we should talk about our longer term planning around our global supply chains on these issues, because about 90% of our PPE is made overseas, and everybody is drawing on it, and we really have to address some of that. But that's a conversation maybe for another day. For now, we're going to do everything we can to try and meet the surge that is existing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's very encouraging. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And Colin, just a reminder, Deborah works for Access Technologies, and their founder and CEO is John Olajide, who's also the chair of the Dallas Regional Chamber right now, and is doing yeoman's work relative to trying to galvanize the business community behind these kinds of things around capacity and PPE and hand sanitizer. Some of the great stories that we're hearing now is that Tito's Vodka is generating a lot of hand sanitizer right now, right out of their factories. So there's a lot of things that are happening in that front. And like you, I've been on, and Tony Vetta and others were on calls with Judge Jenkins almost daily, and so we're getting these updates pretty quickly, and it's a fast and very fluid situation, as we all know. So yeah. So let me switch over to Matthew Adamczyk. You have a question for Colin?
Yeah, this is a little different than the thrust of what we've been talking about so far, but good to see you, Colin, by the way.
Good to see you.
A little concerned about the effect on the Social Security with the unpaid wages and therefore the unpaid taxes. I read a little bit of it that the employer portion of that was only deferred and would have to be paid later. But the portion that's protecting payroll, that's not collected. Social Security is not collected on that, right?
Right. Yeah, that's my understanding.
The bigger concern, I am old enough to be on it, but I haven't filed yet. But my biggest concern is the impact on adult children with disabilities who are going to be counting on that after we pass away.
Yeah.
And the importance of Social Security surviving all of this.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'd add that I anticipate this will move up the date by which the trust fund costed quite a bit.
Yeah, I would think so. I haven't seen it, but I'm sure that's right. Yeah.
So I guess my request is that as we go on to package 4 and 5 and all of that, we start bringing this up. I mean, it's a major source of income for many, many Americans.
Absolutely. And thank you for raising it. I think my staff is on this call. I'm sure they'll make a note that we need to keep our eye on this. But I think you're probably right about the estimate about the when the fund will run out now, that it'll probably be sooner because of this crisis. And it's a critical program, and we haven't had the political will to fix it in a while. But I know there are a few bills that have been floating around trying to address some of the issues. We'll see if maybe some of them get revisited, but certainly it'll be on my radar. And thank you for raising it.
Well, I'm glad it's on your radar. Thanks. There was one that I know about called Social Security 100. Are you familiar with that one?
No, but I may know it by a different name.
Yeah, I can't recite the House bill number.
Yeah.
It seemed to have a lot of backing. And the part that appealed to me was that it called for concessions on both sides.
Yeah.
People on Social Security would accept some reduction in benefits. People who are still paying in would accept some increase in tax. So it's sort of like spread around the pain, if you will.
Yeah. And as you know, that'll probably be what we have to do. I mean, it's not going to be just one way. So.
Right. I don't think we can each say, no, there can't be any change in my part of it. I agree,
Yeah.
except some.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Matthew. I wish everyone was as reasonable about it as you are.
I know.
Yeah. So we have time for one more question, and then we'll close. But we have Dr. John Grabarczyk on the call from the University of Phoenix. And John, leave it to John to have the most unique question that I've seen on this topic. So John, please pose your question.
Thanks, Ken. Congressman, I'm just curious, since I'm washing my hands more frequently and longer now, have you heard of any concerns about the water supply?
That's a great question. Not for us in North Texas, but I was on a call. It's funny you mentioned this yesterday, where some of the Michigan representatives were talking about the issues that they're having still in Flint and some of the other areas where they still don't have potable water. And it is an issue in many parts of the country. There's another aspect to this that we are very concerned with, which is water shutoffs, which is folks who maybe can't pay their water bill and have that utility shut off. When we're encouraging everyone to wash their hands so many times a day, obviously it makes no sense to have that occur. And so we're trying to encourage, with the funding that's been provided to the states and cities, to pause these shutoffs. Some areas have taken different steps than others, but it's absolutely vital that during this period we don't evict people and we don't turn off their water, because we're telling them to stay home and wash their hands. And so either of those could be disastrous.
Great. Colin, we can't thank you enough. Thank you for your service to our district, but more importantly, thank you for being who you are and what you represent, and being here and engaged today with our North Dallas Chamber of Commerce group and talking about very important issues of the day. We really, really appreciate it. And Sushil Kumar, thank you very much for your input as well. We really appreciate all you're doing. We know you all have a lot on your plates right now, and for you to take this kind of time out of your schedule to meet with us, we thank you. We thank you very much, and it means a lot to us.
Thank you, Ken, for all the work the North Dallas Chamber is doing. I know you've been through a lot lately, and I just think that it's a really critical part of our community, and we're happy to be here anytime you need us. And we do have some great resources on my website. You can go there, but you can also call our office for anyone listening to this or watching this or watching the recording. Should you run into any issues, we should be one of your first calls, and we can put you in touch with the SBA or put you in touch with whoever we need to address whatever your issue is. But this is a time where we want to respond quickly to things and hopefully get our community through this in a way that we're able to actually emerge from it and get back to normal life.